Hello and welcome to the first presentation in our Walk Kansas webinar series. We're so glad you're joining us this afternoon and hope that you've been able to get outside and enjoy some physical activity and enjoy some of the warm weather that we've had and able to interact with your Walk Kansas teammates. I'm Sherilyn Jackson, Northeast Regional Family and Consumer Sciences Specialist, and I also coordinate the Walk Kansas program. Before we begin, I want to acknowledge that K-State Research and Extension is an equal opportunity employer, and therefore we don't discriminate against anyone. So if there is a special request or a concern that you need addressed to attend our programs, please reach out to us and let us know. This year, we're offering 3 webinars, and I hope you can join us for all of them. Next week, our friends from Manhattan Running Company will be talking about basic care of our feet and how to choose the appropriate shoes for specific activities that we enjoy. The following week on April 24, I'll be joined by Ashley Swati, who's the Northwest Regional Extension Family Consumer Sciences Specialist, and we're going to be talking about this whole idea of how to shift habits, particularly around physical activity and healthy eating, which habit shift is the theme of our Walk Kansas program this year. So we hope you can join us for these as well. All of these webinars are being recorded. A link to the recording will be posted in the resources section of your Walk Kansas portal. They'll also be sent out to you through the weekly mailings that you should be receiving for the Walk Kansas program. So now I'm delighted to turn it over to our guest. We are so glad to have Michelle Lane with us today. She is the Senior Director for Community Health and Wellness at North Kansas City Hospital. Michelle's been a guest with us before on our Living Well Wednesday webinar series, where she talked about how sleep is a superpower. You'll learn more about that next week through the Walk Kansas newsletter, including a link to her webinar on sleep. She's a wealth of information, and we're delighted to have the opportunity to learn more from her today. So, Michelle, it's all yours.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that wonderful introduction. I am elated. I've been looking forward to this opportunity to share this information because the information I have, I think, is extremely powerful. So my career has been kind of like other people's hair color. It changed over time. I did start originally in psychology. And back then, the focus was on what is broke, right? So psychosis, neurosis, phobias, depression, that type of thing. And we focused on finding cures and treatments. But what I am absolutely intrigued by is the opposite question, which is, when are we happy? And what does it look like to have a good, healthy, thriving life? And so this body of science is called positive psychology. And what I appreciate most about positive psychology is that it is absolutely evidence-based. It's all science. There's no feel-good, fluffy guesswork. It is hard research involving thousands, hundreds of thousands of people. And so I'm an avid learner. I was once told that you're only as interesting as the books you read and the people you meet. So you're going to meet me today, and hopefully I can share some information with you that will change your perspective about happiness and how we find happiness. And so I did a completely ridiculous, extensive literature review, evaluating about 350 studies. I read countless books. I listened to more podcasts than I should probably even admit to. I've scoured the internet. My bedside table basically looked like a recycle bin for about a year and a half. And I dove straight into all of the research about what is happiness, how is it caused. I didn't want, as an ICU emergency, nurse, I love science and I need facts. And so I didn't want like some little Pinterest page that says, oh, happiness is such and such. I want to know the evidence of like, what can give me more happiness in my life? And so I evaluated every single piece of evidence that was out there. I threw out anything that had a hint of bias. If there wasn't a statistically significant finding, it was out of here. If there was funding that was, obscuring what the data would be, I threw it out. And so what we're going to talk about today is the solid evidence about happiness and how we can create more of it in our lives. And so it's up to you to make this information impactful, but that is where we're going today. So we're going to dive right in. I don't need to spend a lot of time on this slide. This world is a freaking mess, right? If it wasn't a political divide, then there is the challenge of our own mind, all of the thoughts and feelings that we have inside of our own head. You know, depression is up, prison populations are up, divorce is up, teen suicide is horrible, opioid epidemic. I could go on and on from a nurse practitioner standpoint of what we are seeing in our communities. Nobody is okay. And this is going to be a great, great like information you can take, put it in your own tool belt, but maybe you can hand off a couple things to help others around us, because we want everybody to be okay. And so when we think about okay, we, need to maybe define a little bit of like, what is happiness? So, to be sure we all have a different definition, but to make sure we're all on the same page, scientists have defined happiness as a combination of how satisfied you are with your life and how good you feel on a day-to-day basis. And so I find it really fascinating. How I kind of dove into all of this was really self-centered. I had gone through a divorce, and was kind of having this midlife crisis. My kids had moved on, and I really wanted to find meaning for myself. And so what struck me when I talked to other people in the health and wellness field, in healthcare, we plan everything in our head, right? This morning when I woke up, I thought about what I was going to do today in the shower. I thought about, I'm going to vow to work out today. I need to get out the chicken for dinner tonight. I actually need to stop and get some seasoning packet for tomorrow's dinner. And you run through everything that you need to do. But we don't plan when our happiness is going to take place. We think that happiness is just going to arrive on our doorstep, like a pizza, like being delivered. But that's not how happiness works. Happiness takes effort, intentionality, energy. And what I want to talk about is how you can grow your muscle of happiness and get the science backing you so you can be effective. So it's really important to kind of clarify what happiness is not. I think it's important too, because, it's not what you think it is. The data shows that happiness is not having lots of money. Money is actually like health. It doesn't guarantee that you're going to be happy, but it sure as heck takes some worry away when you have money, right? Or you have your health. But according to a study done by Princeton, they said that they're about $70,000 a year is all you need, no more or less, to reach the highest point of happiness that you can have with finances. So more than that will only marginally increase your happiness. And we also know that excessively buying things don't boost our happiness long term, because we're always going to return to that set point of happiness. And we're going to talk about where that set point of happiness comes from and how we can give ourselves little boosts of little feel-good neurotransmitters that make us feel good, but we will go back to that set point of happiness. So research recommends that we buy experiences over things. So a concert, a guitar lesson, a sporting event, rock climbing lesson. The research shows that we hold on to these memories with this feel-good neurotransmitter longer than the neurotransmitter that you get when you go and purchase that purse that you wanted, right? That tends to drop off pretty quickly after you get that initial first hit of that neurotransmitter. And so we want sustainable things that's going to make us be happy longer. When we think about what happiness is and is not, it also is not about sex, despite what some people may tell you. Science shows that 2.2 times is the number of weekly romps that it takes to send your happiness levels to the peak, according to University of Colorado Boulder study. People were 55% more likely to report higher levels of happiness if they had gotten busy 2.2 times a week rather than having more sex than that or less sex than that. So you just use that information however you need to in your life, but it's not about money. It's not about sex. So let's talk about like, what is happiness all about? So the largest body of research comes from a huge University of Minnesota twin study. And this is talking about where our set point of happiness comes from. And the key finding is this. It does vary person to person, but 10% of your happiness is determined by your circumstances. This actually is a smaller role than what we had historically thought about it. So you get used to your circumstances over time. And evidence shows that people that have faced adversity are actually happier. Thank goodness, right? So research shows that once you get past that adversity, we get some distance, we get perspective, and we can kind of make sense of this life's challenge, whatever's happened to us. And it actually helps us shape our identity. It helps us cope better with current stressors. And it makes us more resilient and optimistic about our future. And so 10% of your set point of happiness comes from the circumstances that you live in. So if you think about like these commercials where it was like feed the children, and these poor little children had these little Buddha bellies, and they had nothing, right? They had nothing, but yet they're smiling. So you get used to your circumstances over time. And this is so important for people like me who have a high ACE score. And if you don't know what an ACE score is, I invite you to watch a TED Talk called How Childhood Trauma Affects Health Across a Lifetime. It's by Nadine Burke-Harris. It is riveting. If you're into TED Talks, you just go to www.tedtalk.com. But ACE scores are absolutely fascinating. And I have a high ACE score. And so, I've been through a lot of adversity in my life, and I'm refreshed to see that this is not going to determine the main part of my happiness in my life. So that's great. But the next part that determines our set point of happiness is biologically determined. So how happy our parents are, or the people that raised us, does affect our happiness. But guess what? We can't influence that. It's done. You get what you get, and you can't throw a fit. So how you were raised is over, right? You can't hold any grudges. You can't hold any guilt. What we want to talk about today is the 40%. That is the controllable part. That's you, your actions, your behaviors, and how this really makes the biggest difference in your happiness. So 40% of our happiness is controlled by our thoughts, our actions, and our behaviors. This framework in which we filter everything that we see in our life. There was a huge study that I thought was really well done by University of Maryland, and it showed that the average person has between 12,000 and 60,000 thoughts inside their head every day. 12,000 to 60,000 thoughts. And of those thoughts, 80% were negative. 99% were repetitive. So we're repeating the same negative thoughts to ourselves. And this really has an impact on our optimism and our outlook in life. And it reveals that our body responds to how we think, how we feel, and how we act. And this mind-body connection is really the quality of our existence, really rests within this internal dialogue. The quality of our life can be so impacted by what the heck we're saying to ourselves. And so that's the most important thing I want everybody to keep in mind. I think it probably can be best animated with a story. So I have got older adult children. I'm a grandmother, and we don't take, and do gift exchanges anymore. I pay for a trip, and we go on a vacation, and we just make memories, because those, widgets and whatchamacallits are long forgotten. My kids are adults. They can buy what they want. And so we were heading on a trip to Utah, and we were at the airport, and, they came in overhead and they said, hey, excuse me, ladies and gentlemen, we've had a something with the plane. And you can kind of feel the energy of what people were thinking to themselves shift a little bit in the waiting area for where we were going to board, but everybody was still kind of light and airy. We're going to Utah, for heaven's sakes. It's going to be gorgeous. And so the energy shifted, but 15 minutes kind of passed. And they came back on board, and they said, the plane that was bringing in the people, but they did it in this voice, of course, because that's how they announce things. The plane that was bringing in our pilot, there was a required rest period between the two flights because this person had flown all night long. And so kind of explaining that kind of made sense to everybody. We all wanted a rested pilot, but you can still feel there was a little bit of like, Eventually we boarded the plane. They come back on, make another announcement. Ladies and gentlemen, we've discovered we on our checklist, blah, blah, blah. We need to fix this before we take off. There was another delay. And so then you really felt the energy in the plane shift. And the guy next to me pulls out his phone, and we don't get seats next to each other because we're going to spend all vacation with each other. We all need a little downtime before we're together. I don't know if anybody else can relate to that. But this guy pulls out his phone and he just dives right into this conversation. He's like, oh yeah, Sleeping Beauty needed to get some extra naps. Of course, we're waiting on the pilot. Now they discover something wrong that they could have dealt with from the beginning, but they didn't. And you just feel this guy's energy. He didn't even say hello to whoever he was talking to on the other end. He just dives right in. And this person is asking questions and he's responding so negatively. And he's like, I don't know. I may not even meet with the client. If I don't get to the client on time, we're probably not even going to take a vacation. I'm not going to be able to get the bonus. He just down into this spiral of thoughts. And finally, in the end, he's just like, I'll tell you when we get there, and hangs up the phone. Well, then the guy to the right of me, he pulls out his phone and I'm like, oh God, there's two of them. And he pulls out his phone and he's like, hey, hon, they've noticed that there's something wrong with the plane. So glad they caught it before we took off. I don't know when we're going to land, but I'll let you know as soon as we get there. I love you. Can't wait to see you. Blah, blah, blah. Hangs up the phone. Same experience happening to two different people. The framework in which the people experience this experience totally changed it from the positive to the negative, right? I mean, there's some things that are out of your control, but the way in which we view, these things that happen as a victim, right? Are we a victim to our life, or is it just facts? And we don't have to tie emotion or feelings to everything that happens to us. So I think that that is the best example of how we connect our literal physical experiences with what we view the world, the self-talk we have, the way we react, lack of emotional control or intelligence can have effect on all of our happiness. And so thank you for humoring me with that little story, because I just think it's so important to think about all of these experiences in our own life and how we interpret them all so differently. So we've talked a little bit about what happiness is, and we talked about what happiness is not, where, it doesn't come from. But let's talk about the evidence that shows why happiness is even good for us, right? Because we know it feels good. Hands down, the research says, oh, this neurotransmitter feels great in my body, but it's also really good for our health. And so I want to go through some of the studies that I found that demonstrate this. So whether or not you view the glass as half full or half empty may actually determine your risk for heart disease. Just as negative emotions such as depression, anger, hostility, these are all risk factors for stroke and heart attacks. Happiness actually seems to protect the heart according to the science. So some of the studies I really liked were a researcher studied about 1,700 people in Canada for 10 years to determine whether their attitude affected their health. And after accounting for known risk factors within this population, the researchers found that the happiest people were 22% more likely to develop heart disease over the people in the 10-year follow-up than those who scored more negative. So the people that were happier were 22% less likely to get heart disease. Study after study demonstrated that people with the most negative emotions had the highest risk for heart disease, and people that scored highest for happiness had the lowest risk. So Johns Hopkins also had a study where they took a bunch of people with family history for heart disease, and they looked at whether or not they had a positive outlook on life. And those who had a positive outlook were 1/3 less likely to have a heart attack. Over 25 years, they monitored these people than those with a negative outlook. Incredible. So it also fits with a large body of evidence that shows us that pessimism is a really big risk factor for poor health. When pessimistic people develop age-related illnesses like cancer or heart disease, that illness tends to progress faster in the research for people who are more cynical or hostile or negative thinking. So people with shorter telomeres, right? And so in general, people with shorter telomeres tend to die earlier. And I don't know if you know much about telomeres, but telomeres are super interesting. They're these little plastic caps that are the end of our chromosomes, and which they, as our cells, are created and break down and die, this little plastic cap can be shortened with people that are negative thinkers. And so there's a lot of researchers surrounding these and the role that these little telomeres, these little plastic caps that protect our chromosomes, play in aging. And so there's another TED Talk that's about telomeres and aging, and it's just really great. The name of it, I think, is it's The Science of Cells That Never Get Old, something like that. The Science of Cells That Never Get Old, if you're looking for another absolutely excellent TED Talk. So people that are happier are healthier. This is so important to know. Happy people are also less likely to get sick because the brain is directly wired to our immune system. Portions of our nervous system connect with our thymus and our bone marrow, which make our response systems that we have, our immune response systems in our body. So in a study that was done post-COVID, 950 volunteers were asked to be exposed to the cold virus. Don't worry, they were actually compensated for this study, but not to the degree that it disrupted the findings. The participants were surveyed and monitored for 2 weeks up to this certain situation. And they had to report things like feeling energetic or pleased with their life. And for 2 weeks before, then they were exposed to the virus. And those that reported more positive emotions were less likely to get this cold when they were swabbed with the actual cold virus. So they interviewed them for 2 weeks. They came in, literally stuck the flu virus up their nose, put it on the glasses, put it in their mouths. And the people that were more optimistic and reported feeling more energetic leading up to this experiment were less likely to get sick for 2 years after 2 weeks after exposure to the virus. And then Ronald Glazier also did a study for the Institute of Behavioral Medicine at Ohio State University. And this was a wonderful study done with sampling blood from medical students during a stressful period of time. And they had lower acting virus fighting immune cells than those that were studied over periods of non-stress time, like spring break, graduation. They repeatedly found that lower levels of immune cells, these fighter killer T cells, happen during stress. So when you're happier, you're less stressed, and then your immune system can function better and fight off all of those nasty viruses we're seeing and all the things that are coming at us. I don't know about you guys, but we've had an onslaught of that nasal virus at North Kansas State Hospital. We've had so many people, and it just stays with you. And this cough, this tickle cough, it's just incredible. But being happier can ward off that and help your immune system fight. And then lastly, I found over 30 studies that found that happiness actually adds several years to your life. This is even more significant because this is the same amount that scientists have said that you add to your life when you quit smoking. People that were smokers that quit smoking get 7 more years to their life. Why is this not on a billboard? We hear all about how bad smoking is for you. It's time that we talk more openly about the impacts that our mind has over our body and how choosing to be healthy and happy can impact longevity. I mean, your mental health matters so much, just as much as quitting smoking. So think about that. These two are just as important. So incredible, absolutely incredible. So we've talked about what happiness is, we've talked about what it's not, and we have talked about why it's important to us, right? It's good for our health, keeps our immune systems working. But I also want to talk about this wonderful quartet that we have in our body, these neurotransmitters. And so many things can trigger our neurotransmitters, but instead of just being in the passenger seat and waiting for these neurotransmitters to, become triggered, I think that it's super important that we intentionally find opportunities to cause these neurotransmitters to flow. So I'm going to talk about 4 major neurotransmitters that we have in our body and some methodology of when those show up in our body and things we can do on purpose to give ourselves a little squirt of joy in our life. We're going to return to that set point of happiness. Remember, we talked about it comes from a little bit of circumstances, quite a bit from our past of how we were raised, but 40% is in our thoughts and our emotions. That set point of happiness. This is going to be things we can do to give ourselves a little boost, but we'll go back to our normal. Then we're going to talk about how do you raise that set point of happiness, okay? So let's dive into this data. This Magic Quartet is DOSE, D-O-S-E. I'm a nurse, so of course I have acronyms for everything. That's what we do. And these all are made in your gut. And that is mind-blowing to me. When I figured that out and I learned that, I was like, what? I thought feel-good hormones were all in your brain, you feel them, but what happens is in utero, when the baby is being formed, part of what becomes your brain tissue stays back. That brain tissue stays back and it becomes your gut. So that gut feeling you have, or you think something or feel something, you really are thinking and feeling something because that's brain tissue. It has the neurons to have thoughts and emotions. But that gut is where these neurotransmitters, these feel-good hormones are made. And so having that healthy gut is so important to be able to make all these neurotransmitters too, so we can improve our happiness. And so the first one I want to talk about is dopamine. This neurotransmitter is like a feel-good, mood boosting. It's responsible for like relaxation and euphoria, but it really has a lot to do with anticipation. And so this brain chemical makes us motivated to kind of take action. So it's not surprising that in research, it shows that people with self-doubt and like laziness are linked to low levels of dopamine because they're not motivated, to be able to anticipate consequences of things. Dopamine gets released when you set a goal and you achieve it. This is why there's so many of us that love to make a list and check stuff off, right? We get a little dose of dopamine that feels good. I'm totally a list maker. I mean, actually, while I was waiting for this thing to start, I started another list, but I already have other lists that are already started. I love me a good solid list. But addictive drugs like cocaine and methamphetamine, these also act on the dopamine system. It blocks the reuptake of the dopamine, so it gets kind of trapped in the synaptic gap of the brain. And so you feel that euphoria longer when that's what that high feeling is on dopamine or on, cocaine or methamphetamine. But that's why people get addicted to that euphoric feeling. New research also shows that dopamine is what's released in our body when somebody likes something on our social media. And this could be why some people get so addicted to their social media. I have a new grandbaby and, I post a picture of her and I just, maybe it's the anticipation of people loving how cute the photo is or whatever it is. But I think that the easiest way to get a quick dose of dopamine, I like to stay away from my phone as much as possible. Yes, it will give us a nice little quick dose of dopamine, but make a list, achieve something, set goals for yourself by the end of the week or the end of the day, whether personal or work related, or in your relationship. I think it's important to also treat your relationship like a business, right? Have a plan. Where do we want to be? We want to take 2 vacations this year. Where are we going to put those? And really have things to look forward to and set goals and achieve them is one of the quickest ways that you can get dopamine in your life. So I love me some dopamine. And then the second neurotransmitter is oxytocin. So oxytocin occurs with intimacy and like trust and building healthy relationship. It's, released when men and women, during intimacy, or women and women, or men and men, or during women in childbirth, or when you're breastfeeding a baby. All of that is oxytocin. But the easiest way to get oxytocin is when you give somebody a hug. That increase in social bonding can, really give us a beautiful dose of oxytocin. In light of like COVID and all the things that have happened, though, sometimes we can't go around hugging everybody we walk into, right? I tend to still be a hugger, I'll be honest with you. But the research shows that eye contact and attentiveness in a conversation can actually help drive your oxytocin too. So, that energy that you get when you're having an engaging conversation where like you're vibing and you're like back and forth, kind of doing your thing, that's also oxytocin that shows up. So a wonderful way that you can get oxytocin in your everyday today is making good eye contact with people. We have a rule here at the hospital. It's a 10-foot, 5-foot, 2-foot rule. And so if I see somebody within the hallway and I'm within 10 feet of them, I say hi, right? We don't have our phones out in the hallway. They're not okay. This is not how we want to represent ourselves. But if I'm in 5 feet of somebody, I'm going to make good, solid eye contact. And I'm going to say hi. And I'm going to ask them how they're doing. How's your day? Good to see you. If I'm within 2 feet of somebody, I'm going to engage in a conversation with them, right? So if I'm standing in line for a coffee, then I'm going to say, what's going well, right? Always lead with something positive. We don't want to make sure, we don't want to lead with something negative of, oh, the weather's crappy or this line is taking forever. So my go-to response is, what's going well with you, with strangers or even people that I know. I find it to be an easy way to greet people in a positive manner. So oxytocin is a wonderful thing you can get from connection, human connection with other people. And then our third neurotransmitter is serotonin. And I love this. I love this. I love this one. This is what happens and we feel in our bloodstream when you feel significant or important. This is also why maybe people maybe fall into gang or criminal activity. That culture of feeling important to somebody is extremely powerful. And a quick way to get a dose of serotonin is to give gratitude. So a handwritten card or a note or like things I like to do is I will see a child typically that's holding a door open for other people as they enter. And, I just make a big deal about it. I say, oh my gosh, your parents must be so proud of you holding the door for other people. That's so kind. And you see these little humans just swell up like little ticks, right? I mean, they're getting this huge dose of serotonin and feeling good. I'm getting serotonin just by telling you this story. But moments where people can have pride and feel proud, even if it's a coworker, right? If you see somebody working on a project, I will take time and I'll say, dude, you have freaking put in the hours on that project, no matter how hard, how good or bad it turns out, like you have done your due diligence, right? And just having that, somebody seeing them can be so, so powerful. And the thing that's so great about gratitude too, about making somebody else feel important, it's freaking free. It's like sparkles. I mean, you could just sprinkle gratitude all over the place and it costs you nothing to do that for other people. So, words are powerful. Use them, use them. But another way that you can get serotonin is through UV, like through sun. So 20 minutes of the sun promotes vitamin D and serotonin production in your body. So that's another way. I've got a coworker. I am lucky enough to have windows in my office, but I have a coworker that bought off of Amazon this little thing called a happy light. And it comes with research that backs this light. She just puts it in her bathroom and she turns it on in the morning, or she brings it into the office when it's dark, and she has this light, and as long as it hits some corner of her white of her eyebrow or eyeballs, it helps make vitamin D in her body. And so they've got all these studies of pre and post, and it's called a happy light. It's like $15. She freaking loves it. So whatever you got to do to get a dose of serotonin, to give you that little neurotransmitter feel good, do it. Compliment somebody, take a minute and just show gratitude to somebody, and it will give you a beautiful dose of serotonin. And then last but not least is my favorite. So endorphins. Endorphins are released with exercise. This is why walking matters so much for you guys. I'm going to talk about this walking program that you guys have done and accomplished has so many wonderful impacts on your level of happiness. But one of them is walking gives you endorphins. Endorphins, the actual word, it's interesting. It translates to self-producing morphine. That's what the Latin root word of endorphin is self-producing morphine. And endorphins are like opiates basically in your chemical structure. If you look at the makeup of an opiate, the chemical structure of an opiate, endorphins are off by 2 molecules. Okay. I mean, this is how important this feel-good hormone is. And it's not an easy one to get. I mean, exercise, getting up off the couch and those types of things, moving your body, however you do it, can give you endorphins, whether that's playing pickup sticks in your yard, or it's parking further away, or taking that one flight of stairs, or it's cleaning a back closet that you wanted to tackle. Moving your body will give you endorphins. So, endorphins are like this opiate chemical structure. We talked about that, and they have analgesic properties. It's made in the pituitary and the hypothalamus. And during big exercise, you get huge lifts of endorphins. So like running and things that really stress out your body. Maybe you haven't walked in a while, that really stresses out your body. This value goes without saying. The motion is the lotion for your body. So regular exercise is one of the most important ways that you can get an endorphin release. You can also get endorphins from laughter. And so trying to incorporate laughter into your day can be a wonderful way to give you a little boost of happiness. You're going to go back to your set point of happiness, remember, but it can give you that little boost. Other things that showed up in the science are oils, like essential oils. Lavender and vanilla were both tied with happiness. And then things that were like, you wouldn't think about it, but spicy foods gives you a dose of endorphins. That's why some people love spicy foods. They get all hot and then they get this feel good feeling, this endorphin basically in their body. This whole science behind the cold showers, there's like a scientist that is into this whole painful stimuli with a cold shower, or why people like acupuncture or acupressure. You get a release of endorphins after you go through a little bit of pain, just like with exercise. So a little bit of pain and a little bit of suffering in our body can give us a big dose of feel good endorphins. So those are the 4 major chemicals that are responsible for happiness within our body. And some little tips that we can do to try to give ourselves doses of this, happiness drug before we go back to our set point of happiness. We've covered what happiness is, why it's important, how we can give ourselves little doses. But now what we're going to do is we're going to talk about 4 things that you can do to increase your set point of happiness. And so I loved the research within all of this, because remember, this was, almost 400 research studies, more books than I can count. And these are things that had to show up at least 30 times in the research in order for me to talk about it, these 4 things. So one of the research studies that I loved was an impressive study done by the Harvard Study of Adult Development. And this was a study that tracked lives for 1,000 men initially for over 90 years. And this study is actually still going on. This is the longest study of adult life that has ever taken place out of Harvard Medical School. It began in the Great Depression. And actually, JFK was one of the original subjects in this study at Harvard. So investigators took 2 groups of men. Half were Harvard students and the other half were the poorest of the poor. They didn't even have running water. And they surveyed these 2 groups every 2 years across their lifespan. Now they're studying their spouses and their descendants, their grandchildren to this point. But what they studied was their physical and mental health, their professional lives, their friendships, their MRIs, their marriages, their IQ scores, their blood tests, their brain scans, their in-person interviews, personality type, IQ, drinking habits. I mean, I could just go on and on and on. I actually reached out to Harvard Medical School wanting a copy of this data to look at it myself, just because I was so blown away by how well done it was. They even measured the length, the hanging length of the scrotal sac on all of these gentlemen. I mean, I've never seen a study that did all of these data points. Every 2 years, these people came back. All of this data was collected. And now, like I said, still studying on the spouses and the children and the grandchildren. And the thing that is so fascinating and has floored me is it wasn't the middle-age cholesterol level that predicted how these people were going to grow old. It was how satisfied they were with their relationships. The people most satisfied with their relationships at age 50 were the healthiest at age 80. Not my blood pressure, not my cholesterol. It's how happy I am, my relationships that I have with people. I thought this was so interesting. And it actually bodes well with the other body of research that's coming out about through National Geographic, the Blue Zones. I don't know if you guys have seen the documentary on this, but what they did is there are populations of centenarians, people that live to be over 100 years old, pockets around the world. And what National Geographic did is they went and they studied these pockets of people and they said, what similarities do all these groups have in common, and what could be things that would be beneficial to, do in our own lives in order to live a long, healthy life? Nurturing relationships showed up. Number one, healthier people, these centurions have a strong sense of community. And it doesn't mean you have to have a spouse. You could have a sibling. You could have, any type of tight relationship with other people is going to be that. And so joining today, even with this group of people, or joining this group for, the Kansas Walk, is a wonderful way to make connection. But it also showed us really two big lessons about relationships. Okay. Social relationships, they matter, right? Okay. So good relationships keep us happier and healthier, people more connected to their community, their friends, their family. They are going to live longer than those that are not connected. And so the other piece of this stone with this study is that loneliness kills people more isolated than they wanted to be. There are people that are introverted, like my ex-husband, that want to not talk to people ever in their life. That's different. The people that want to be involved and just somehow are not, those people, their health and their brain function decline sooner, and they die younger than those that did not ever report loneliness. And so one thing that we can do is to make sure that we are connecting with others, make conversation while you're standing in line, make eye contact in the hallway, follow the 10-5-2 rule. Masks are hard to be able to see somebody's expressions, but I even do something, and it's kind of cheating. I hope nobody I work with sees this, but I leverage the notes section in my phone, and I type in notes about people that I work with. So I am mindful and have conscientious, intentional conversations with people. So if somebody has a granddaughter just diagnosed with autism, that they're getting tested, or they have, they're doing a 5K race for the first time, I put that in my notes, and then I check back and I follow up with them, and say, oh man, how did that testing, figure out with your granddaughter? And this has made a big impact, not just in people's, view of me, but also I feel better about this, because sometimes you just need a little guide to help you. I want to be, in contact, but sometimes you have so many things coming at you, you can't remember everything. And so I think that is just a wonderful tool to be able to use to stay in connection with people and leverage what we already have. So number one way to raise your set point of happiness is finding nurturing, if I could talk, relationships and connecting with other people. So number one, that's a big one. The second thing we can do to increase our set point of happiness is to intentionally find our flow and seek out new experiences. Kind of gets coupled with this, but finding your flow happens with exercise. So this is one of those things that whatever it is that you do, that you forget all about everything else. Like I have a sister that she pours a glass of wine and she cooks in the kitchen, and she does like all these little things, and she turns on a little music, and she just finds her flow. And that can increase your set point of happiness. Intentionally putting that into our day-to-day of how we are going to find happiness this day. And exercising is one of the biggest ways that we can increase our set point of happiness. Flow and exercise, holy cow, right? We know that these are important things, but they're easily discarded, but we need to make them a priority. So whether you're a gamer and you find flow by losing yourself in a video game with somebody across the country, or you love fishing, or you love quilting. I've got a friend that loves to do embroidery. I tried to learn to do this. She said I was one of the worst embroiderers she's ever seen. That was pretty entertaining, but anything that helps you find your flow. I am a hiker. I love to go in nature. I feel most myself when I am in nature, and I walk, and everything just floats away from me. And just finding that flow can be such a wonderful thing. This is why going and doing things like a new experience, like throwing axes or doing a mystery dinner date or a scavenger hunt or something like that, can also help us find our flow, because you're focused on this new experience. And so you quit worrying about all of these other things like taxes and the fact that I need an HVAC person to come out and check out my air conditioner and all of those other things, right? So this body of research was absolutely fascinating and probably not new news to most of you. But what is new news is how you need to incorporate this every day, just like you tell yourself, I'm going to set the chicken out and I'm going to, blah, blah, blah. It is, how am I going to find flow every day? Hands down. Second way we can increase our set point of happiness. Now, the third thing, and this is my most favorite, I love the research related to happiness in this, is that we actually get more happiness from helping others and doing nice things for other people than for ourselves. It's simply part of our nature to be altruistic and compassionate. And I love these studies. They were done with toddlers, some of them, and they were video studies. And there was a toddler, in the screen, you could see sitting in the lap of a parent, and the researcher would drop something or have their hands all full and was trying to open a doorknob. And that little toddler would just jump up with no prompting and pick up the thing that the researcher had dropped or try to open the door. And, it's tempting to think that happiness is like this huge, lofty goal that requires this giant change, but it's not. These are habits. These are just changing your habits. And according to research, it's just so much simpler and just these small actions that can have significant impacts on your happiness. And so just doing things to help other people can help you. So one of the things my kids and I do is a couple times a year, we go get rolls of quarters and we tape them to the waiting room vending machines here at the hospital, either on the cancer floor or the open heart unit. And we just put a little note in there and says, like, have a Coke and a smile on us, or something like that, right? And then we don't just walk away. We tape it to the vending machine and then we sit there in the waiting room. And then that's when like the magic happens, because watching people's expression as they come up and they see it and they're like, oh, that's cool. And then they may tell somebody that's with them, a story about a random act of kindness or something like that, or they put $1 in themselves. I mean, you think that the money would just disappear, but the money actually grows, which is, highly entertaining and not what we expected from this kind of experience. But what we do is we love to sit and watch what occurs afterwards and the generosity that other people have and how this can change the energy of that waiting room. Just a little shift, just a little tiny bit. And so we're always looking for opportunities that we can help other people. For Christmas, I told you we go on a trip, but one of the things that I like to do with my teenager or my 20-some-year-olds is I give them $50 and they know it's coming every year. And I tell them to give it away. And then when we come back over Christmas dinner, we do eat dinner together because I love food. And everybody has to tell their story about how they gave away their $50. And whether that is in $5, exchanges or $150 to somebody that is a server that just wows you, or a college student or whatever that is. And so last year I did, I loved mine. It was really fun. It was nearing the holidays actually. And I guess, I got to backtrack a little bit. I think it's important too to notice that part of why this works, this helping others, is first of all, you have to think about it because you're going to tell this story later. But helping others, you're always looking for an opportunity to help other people. So your framework is you're constantly surveilling and scanning your existence for opportunities of people doing awesome things so that you could either verbally reward them or say, hey, I see you doing this, blah, 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 and I'd love to give you this gift or whatever it may be. And that's the power of this helping out thing, right? Is that, yes, it's helpful, but I'm going to get feel good hormones by telling this story again later. So it's this compounded wonderfulness and just changing this framework, the film that is over my eyes, and just looking for people doing cool things has just been absolutely transformational. And the evidence shows it. So now back to my story, how I gave away my money last year was I went to Aldi's. I'm an Aldi's fan. If you don't shop at Aldi's, I don't even know if we can be friends. And I saw this gal and she had like three littles in her shopping cart and they're all wanting something, right? Wanting something. And she's doing her shopping and she had a list. She was trying to manage the children. And I saw her go to the frozen shrimp and she looked at the frozen shrimp and she looked at how, big it was. You could tell she was hemming and hawing. She put it in the cart. She put it out of the cart. The boy said, I want shrimpies. I want shrimpies. I love shrimpies. And she's like, we're not going to do shrimp this time, but we're going to do it next time. Maybe it's too much right now, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, boom, eureka, we are buying shrimp. So I circled back behind that little family and I got enough shrimp for $50 and just went through, paid for it and brought it back to the little gal and was like, hey, have some shrimp on me. I was just looking for an opportunity to, share some of the great things that have happened in my life. And I'd love to make you have a better day too. And this little boy wants some shrimpies. So, and she was just elated. And even telling you the story, it makes you kind of emotional. Like I'm emotional even telling it because first of all, it helps my feel good and my happiness to know that I'm the type of person who does that crap. And being intentional about it makes you feel good about yourself. It makes you feel pride for yourself, but it also gives you those feel good hormones. So look for opportunities to be able to just minutely help another person, compliment them sincerely. If you see somebody with a new hair color, a new style, or they've worn a different shirt with like maybe a collar, my dude wore a collared shirt the other day and I was like, holy cow, you got your funeral wedding shirt on. It's amazing. You look so nice, but you could tell he noticed that I noticed, and it was just a fun little moment, right? So helping other people is one of the ways that we can increase our set point of happiness. And so take that and run with it, people. There are so many opportunities. And then the last behavior that I want to talk about that it can increase your set point of happiness is one that is not going to surprise you: gratitude. Being grateful for what you have, it enlarges our prefrontal cortex over time. This is the magical button. Gratitude across the board, research hands down. If you follow Brene Brown, Gretchen Rubin, I mean, there are so many books on this, but it is foundational in science that just doing a couple things to express gratitude can help you increase your set point of happiness. So some of the people I loved and some of the things they did that showed up as a positive impact in science is Gretchen Rubin. She's actually a Kansas City girl. She went to Pembroke Hill here in Kansas City, and she wrote a couple books about happiness. And she found that if you write something down one time a week for 6 weeks, it can increase your exercise amount that you do. It can increase your happiness and it can increase your sleep. Just writing, that's 6 times. Writing down something one time for 6 weeks, okay? And then Brene Brown. I mean, everybody loves Brene Brown. It's like God, Oprah, and Brene Brown. This gal is a social scientist who is brilliant. And she has studied so many things, but one of the things that she talks about is the capacity for real joy. And she said in 2 of her books and in one of her podcasts that a single person with the capacity to experience real joy has to actively practice gratitude. And so those two are just linked together in her science. And then I also loved all the work of Seligman. Seligman is another psychologist that has done all sorts of trials and studies with gratitude, most of them done controlled trials done in at Penn University. He did a huge experiment over the internet. And he found that the most like turbocharged way to get your gratitude going is doing a gratitude visit. So having a verbal conversation, a testimonial between like a teacher, a pastor, a grandparent, a friend, a coworker, anybody that you sincerely feel like a debt of gratitude towards, visit that person or write them a letter if you can't physically, see them, or have a conversation virtually if you need to. And the thing that Seligman found is the remarkable thing is that people who did this just once, just one time, were measurably happier and less depressed a month later from when they did this one thing. And by the time 3 months rolled around, it did kind of like wear off. And so what he moved to his next section of research is having your daily blessings. And so this is what I practice, but it took like some trial and error for me. I actually wasn't doing it right in my head. I was thinking gratitude, but I was way too surface level on it. It's hard to articulate how I handled this, but I was at night writing down things that I was grateful for. So Segelman said that if you write down at least once a day, 3 things that you're grateful for, your trio, that you will be less depressed and you will be happier, not just 3 months later. Remember that one time testimonial to person drops off after 3 months, but 6 months later, if you do this daily, 3 things you're grateful for. So I started this journal. I got this little notebook, but I'll be honest, like I didn't feel any better. There was no magic for me. And I went to a talk and I don't even remember what the talk was, but somebody started talking about gratitude and journaling. And I realized that I was not doing this right. So in my journal, I was writing things like, I'm grateful for my grandbaby. I'm grateful for, somebody brought donuts to work today. I wasn't getting into the meat, if that makes sense. So like my recent journal, I was doing another lecture on another topic, and I'd never done it before. And this was on Monday, and I was on Sunday going through my slides for like the 87th time. And my son came up behind me. He's 22. He lives in the basement, kind of like a pet. He's in college, but he does come up for air to get food every once in a while. And he came up behind me and he just kind of squeezed my shoulders and was just like, "You're going to do great, Mom. You're going to do great." And I wrote that in my journal and it even makes me emotional because like being seen by somebody is so important in our set point of happiness. And so that's what I wrote that night in my journal, was that Seth acknowledged how hard seeing me work on things and was just like, "You're going to do great," and kind of gave me the reassurance that I needed to like put the notes down and, trust myself that I know the material and people are going to, hear my message and understand it. And, so you have to write about things in your gratitude journal that you really connect with. It can't just be some surface level thing. I mean, sometimes I do write just 2 words, gringo dip. And if you've ever had margaritas cheese dip, you understand what I'm saying. Gringo dip can bring me a lot of joy. Okay. And it isn't, but I understand how happy I feel with cheese dip. And so, it can work, but it needs to be really personal, deep things that you feel gratitude for in order to make this piece work. And so being grateful for what you have can be one of the most important things you can do. So journaling did show up in the research too, when it's kind of a side piece of this gratitude thing. It does help you identify some of your negative patterns maybe. And so if you can get a good discipline about it, that's really where you get your most bang for the buck. I actually bought, I don't think I have one over there. It's not here, it's at home, but I have these little books that I bought that are blank journals that it's just a spot for just what you're grateful for. It just kind of keeps me organized. And I like to think, this is my ego talking right now, but I like to think that when I pass, my kids or my grandkids are going to take these books of like volumes of years of something I'm grateful for, 1 to 3 things every single day, and have a better insight into who I am, or they will love to read it too. But I'm sure they'll probably just toss it. But I like to think that I'm making it an heirloom. I don't know, but I just think it's such a personal record of the inside of me, right? And so there's that win too, that you can create this treasure for other people. So last thing you can do is be grateful to help increase your set point of happiness. And so today, that is it for all of the words. Our happiness is absolutely in our control, in our thoughts and our actions and our external communication. It's all dictated, and it's all dictated through us and our happiness. And so we want to make sure that we work on nurturing relationships, finding our flow, helping other people, and being grateful. I like to think of emotions as being contagious. just like a virus, right? We tend to affect other people around us. Happy people tend to lift the mood for everybody else around us. And so, unhappy people can bring us down. So hopefully we can all lift the moods of those around us. I'm incredibly grateful today for your time, and hopefully I've said something that you can start or stop doing. I believe that we have a couple minutes for questions, so I'll be quiet and see if Sherilyn wants to come back on and see if anybody has any questions in the group, or see if I can navigate any of that myself. But I'm also going to put my contact information up here. If you have any other questions moving forward, I would be happy to share my information with anybody else. So get a deliberate plan, and over time, this will become part of your routine. So
Thank you so much, Michelle. There's all kinds of accolades coming in through chat.
oh, I love, yay,
So
good.
you
I
need
love,
to read those. Also,
okay.
there's one question that came in earlier. Can you get an oxytocin response only from human contact, or would hugging your pet cause a release of it too?
Animals are great. Oxytocin, loving anything. So if you love, it didn't need to be, it could be an inanimate object, right? If you love your car, you want to go pet your brand new car and you feel good about it, that's, absolutely. But yeah, animals are super powerful, showed up in the research. I should have mentioned that. So, oh my gosh, you guys are so kind. I love that. Thank you so much. I just kind of scrolled through the chat. What great feedback. That makes my heart.
Yes.
Thank you.
I think we're all going to feel a dose of happiness after just being here today.
Well, I hope so. And feel free to share these slides. And I do believe today's talk is being recorded. So if you have somebody in your life that you think that this information would benefit later, just jump right back on, and Ms. Jackson will show you guys. I think there'll be a link to wherever this will be landing eventually. Yep. So that's so nice. Oh my gosh, you guys are making me smile on my insides. Am I turning pink?
Any questions? Any more questions for Michelle?
Oh, good. And those TED Talks are wonderful. I advise anybody to go back and listen to those. That one about the ACE scores is really got a lot of information about dealing with other people that have maybe been exposed to trauma too, and coming from a place of understanding and perspective taking. So it was a really, really well done one. All right.
You may be getting some other invitations from this. Looks like in the chat.
Happy to share with anybody. I told her, she was like, what can I do? Can I send you some tchotchkes or whatever? And I was just told her, I said, this is a mutual gratifying thing. I love researching. I love understanding what the science says can do to improve the quality of our life. And so digging through all of this has been just as beneficial for me. And then when I do talks like this, it just brings it back up to the surface too. So happy to share with anybody. So. Oh, yeah. Terry said she's got a 90-year-old mother. Yeah, I've got a 94-year-old grandmother too, and she's in a little bit of a spiral too. So we've done some work with her.
Great. Well, thank you everyone for joining us today. Just again, want to remind you our next webinar will be on Wednesday of next week. And that's when our friends from the Manhattan Running Company will be talking about basic foot care and choosing shoes for your specific activities. So please join us. More information will be shared again. It's the same link to join to the webinar. So again, thank you for joining us today.
All right. Bye, guys.